So Judge Lamberth then began a process that took almost a year. And what he did was he struck limited immunity agreements with the FBI and with the DOJ. DOJ, Deborah Curtis, was negotiating these immunity agreements along with the FBI's counsel, James Baker, under Judge Lamberth. And they eventually have two immunity agreements, one for possession and one for testimony. In August 19th of 2015, Montgomery, with his attorney, turns over 47 hard drives to the FBI. And that is the first part of the immunity agreement. He hands over the 47 hard drives in Miramar, Florida. And at that point, the hard drives are then verified. And he comes back in November and December of 2015, and he testifies with DOJ Deborah Curtis and Comey's top two special agents, Barnett and Giardina, William Barnett, Walter Giardina, in a secure SCIF at the FBI field office. So while under oath, after those 47 hard drives have been verified by the FBI over those months, he testifies under oath while being videotaped for 3.5 hours. Now, you understand that if you go and you testify under oath to the FBI and you lie, you will have committed a felony and you will be arrested.
Well, hey, look at General Flynn. Reportedly, even if you don't lie, they'll hit you with a felony and try to throw you in jail, right?
Well, and particularly in this where you've got a CIA,
right.
NSA, FBI whistleblower coming forward, making charges,
right.
That he then provides the backup information that they verify, and then he is given wider, greater immunity. So for possession and his testimony, after the 47 hard drives have been verified, which are chock full of 600 million documents. Now, that's really difficult to understand. 600 million documents of illegally gotten intel from spying on people. And to understand that 600 million documents, when placed one upon the other, measure 30 miles high. 30 miles high of documents of illegally gained wiretapping information.
Now, Alan, thank you for that summary right there, Mary. Now, Alan, I have a question for you. You ready?
Go ahead.
All right, here it is. It has been said that Dennis Montgomery, it's been said a lot of things, but it's been said that the information he handed over, there was nothing on these 47 hard drives, that they were blank, or that it was fraudulent, or that he never. I mean, there's all kinds of whisper down the alley stuff, right? Here's the question I have for you, Alan. Why would Judge Lamberth provide him protection as of August 2014 if what he showed him in his chambers, this 100 pages, was fraudulent?
Well, for any of your listeners that want to, they can just go on Wikipedia and look up who Judge Lamberth is. He's possibly the top national security federal judge in the United States. After the 9/11 attacks, when the federal government needed warrants, needed to do secret wiretaps, he was the go-to guy. So he's been at the center of the war on terror. So I think those credentials would lend one to be able to believe that he recognizes important national security information when he sees it. I don't think that someone could just come off the street and provide some sort of hoax information and pull the wool over Judge Lamberth just based on his experience.
Well, and not only that, Alan, but it appears that Judge Lamberth then was the guy who went to bat for Montgomery for pushing through with the Department of Justice and the FBI these immunity agreements. So then my next question to you, Alan, is that when Dennis Montgomery goes down to Florida and turns in these hard drives, if they're bogus, if they're fraudulent, why did they give him limited immunity at that point, and why didn't they arrest him for lying to the FBI?
That's a great question, and they haven't arrested him. And that was now, we're coming up almost on 4 years since he went to Miramar to the field office that's near Miami. The Miami field office provided physical evidence, which was the form of the hard drives that were then, remember, James Comey was FBI director at that point,
right,
and James Baker was the general counsel of the FBI. And so, no, he's never been prosecuted for providing false information. Subsequently, he then went to the field office, like Mary said, in the Washington, D.C. field office, into the SCIF, which is a sensitive compartmented information facility where, you can openly talk about top secret information without being concerned about listening devices or being wiretapped. And he's never been accused by the federal government of providing false information. Furthermore, James Baker actually on closed door testimony before members of the House of Representatives. And this was information that was considered committee sensitive, that then subsequently became public after Representative Collins brought it forward. He then said that the information was turned over to the FBI. He didn't say we received false information. He didn't say we received bogus evidence. He said we received storage devices. That did happen.
Well, and didn't he also say, now this is under oath also, right? So it was 2 days that this former general counsel James Baker testified in front of Congress of October 2018 under oath. The first time they asked him if any illegal surveillance had been done by the Obama administration on Trump or Americans. He initially, on his first day of testimony, said no. On his second day of testimony, he came back and said, I got to correct the record here, right? Isn't that right?
Yes, that is correct.
And then he said he sent a team down, as you said, Alan, to get the stuff. But he also said, and they asked him, well, what was this about? And he goes, it was about illegal, and tell me if I'm saying this wrong, but it was about illegal surveillance. I mean, you guys had it in one of your papers, illegal surveillance by government officials on other government officials and on American citizens. And he mentioned Dennis Montgomery's name. Am I wrong?
Exactly correct.
Okay,
Dave.
so I don't get, so Alan and Mary. I'll start with Alan, then we'll go to Mary. Alan, I'll get your impression, and then I'll get Mary's. Alan, so Judge Lamberth, one if not the top national security judges in the country, saw this stuff Montgomery brought to him, he said, I'm giving you protection, worked out an immunity agreement where they initially gave him limited immunity when he turned some of these hard drives in. And they didn't charge him with perjury at the time. They brought him back 3 months later, interviewed him for 3 hours under oath, under video. They didn't arrest him. They didn't charge him. But they increased, not decreased. They didn't strip him of his immunity. They increased his immunity. And then,
yes,
when, as of October of 2018, when former general counsel of the FBI, James Baker, testified, he testified that he sent a team down to get this stuff from, and he said that Dennis Montgomery, not some boogeyman, Dennis Montgomery, and that it involved illegal surveillance, his word, illegal surveillance by government officials, and of American citizens.
Yes, that's the information that was provided to the FBI when Dennis originally approached the FBI through his attorney, Larry Klayman. So when Baker speaks about Dennis Montgomery, he speaks about first Larry Klayman approaching the FBI, and then subsequently says that the client was Dennis Montgomery, that he was a government contractor, and that Montgomery claims to have information about illegal surveillance of Americans, including government officials. And then Baker, in his second, not his first, in his second testimony, where he begins his whole session, hey guys, I need to amend something I need to add something to the previous testimony. So that was an interruption of the workflow in that committee meeting that he was like, wait a minute, I need to cover this. Mm-hmm. And that's where he talked about it.
So, Mary, why is there all this confusion? So what? Let's go here. Many people say, well, Dennis Montgomery has been given ample opportunity to present information about the hammer to the press, to people asking questions, and he hasn't done so. And because he hasn't done so, even though there's all this other stuff that we've just talked about, okay, Lamberth, the FBI, limited immunity, being advanced to full immunity, being advanced to no prosecution of the guy for lying, okay? The question is, well, why hasn't Dennis Montgomery provided information when people in the media, other people, ask, hey, Montgomery, this is really legit, this hammer, give me some information. So Dennis Montgomery has been labeled a fraud because he hasn't provided information, not to the FBI or Judge Lamberth, which he did, but to journalists, to Joe Public, to anyone who's... So educate us on Dennis Montgomery not turning over information to the press or to James Risen, who there's some questions about James Risen and who he's affiliated with, a journalist. Why hasn't he? I mean, why doesn't Dennis Montgomery just say, hey, gang, here's the source code for the hammer. Here's the information. Why doesn't he do it?
Well, that's important distinction, because you have to understand that in 2006, DIA Director John Negroponte invoked the state secrets privilege against Dennis Montgomery. Now, having the state secrets privilege invoked against you means that basically the government has put a muzzle, a gag order on you, and you are not allowed to speak to that which they are putting the gag order on. Now, Dennis Montgomery at that point was working for E-Trepid for the CIA, and that has to be put in context, and I will in a moment. But so Dennis is not allowed to speak, or he violates the state secret privilege. They also put a government protective order on Dennis. Now, that's important because if Dennis spoke to certain things or gave people information about some of this information, he would be charged with treason and immediately imprisoned. And so that you have to understand, and there are people who have come out and said, oh, he had so what? He had the state secrets privilege. They didn't even mention the hammer in the court documents. Well, that is counterintuitive. Imagine that you're invoking the state secrets privilege on someone and putting a gag order on them, and then thinking that they would put the information, that which they're trying to keep secret, in the legal documents that everyone has access to. That's just that doesn't fly. No. So Dennis had the state secrets privilege and the government protective order invoked upon him that he must not speak to these things. So that is why he came forward as a whistleblower to expose that Brennan and Clapper were running a parallel platform, super surveillance system, where they were wiretapping all of America, violating the law. But beyond that, you understand the parallel platform has no sign-ins, none of the safeguards that the system was created for, and understanding that the system was created according to our military sources. This was a foreign surveillance tool to keep America safe after 9/11. Okay. And Brennan and Clapper created a parallel platform and then turned this very powerful surveillance tool that had multiple echelons of sign-offs to ensure it was never turned against the American people. And Brennan and Clapper did exactly that. They turned the surveillance system, the hammer, on their own parallel platform against the American people for, according to Dennis blackmail and leverage.
Okay, Mary, let me get this straight. the hammer was initially created, this parallel platform. And you know what, Mary, I'm sure in my discussions with Bill Binney and Kirk Wiebe, there are many parallel platforms, right? But this particular parallel platform was used to protect our citizens and our country after 9/11, looking, if you will, pointing the lens internationally for foreign terrorists. But what I believe you just, and tell me if I got this wrong, but what I picked up was that early in the Obama administration, I believe you mentioned in early 2009, earlier in this interview, that Brennan and Clapper said, "Ooh, this is really quite good. Let's not point it toward international terrorists. Let's just make it our little thing. And let's strip all the reporting system out of it, and let's use it and turn the lens internally within the United States on our, if you will, political enemies, or actually the American public, but we'll pick out our political enemies, and we'll get information on our political enemies and use that as a means of leverage, control, blackmail, coercion." Do I have that right?
Spot on, Dave.
So this became a privatized rogue system used by a select few, let's say.
Exactly. This is taking the keys to the kingdom and turning it against the American people for control, for power, for blackmail and leverage.
Now, Alan, Bill Binney and Kirk Wiebe have come out long ago and said the NSA platform, of which they helped create, right? That the NSA platform, and they left in 2001, was being used illegally, criminally, to, quote, spy on Americans, if you will, right? Would you agree with that assessment, Alan?
Yes, from my understanding, when Binney became a whistleblower during the Bush administration, that was the information he brought forward, which at the time, this was before Snowden, at the time, that information just on its own was shocking to the American people.
And Kirk Wiebe did the same.
Yes.
So one of the issues is that, and Mary and Alan, do you agree that the NSA system for years has been used by some individuals in government in a criminal manner to illegally surveil Americans? Do you agree with that, Mary?
Yeah, I think that the collection of metadata and turned out Snowden that it was more. But what we're looking at with the hammer is far more malignant.
In what way?
This is going after your political opposition. This is going after, as we watched with the Tea Party. Mm-hmm. If we don't agree with your politics, we will, when you listen to the whistleblower tapes, they tell that they were not only using the hammer for blackmail and leverage, but also it had exploits that they could send to your computer. They could plant documents that you should not have in your possession. It could plant information pornography, child pornography that you could be arrested with. So this is, if you remember Cheryl Atkinson, that mm-hmm. suddenly she had documents that were not hers that were planted on her computer. She saw her computer going on and off at night. So this is a very serious thing, because imagine this, Dave. Imagine this is no different, except with far greater power than what the Stasi and the Gestapo, the leverage that they had over their people. This is taking away. This is reverse engineering and destroying the Constitution and taking all rights away from the American people.
It's pure evil. And so, Mary, you agree that the NSA platform has been abused for a long period of time, correct?
Yes, but not to this extent, not anything like this.
Right. But, Alan, do you agree that the NSA platform has been abused criminally by government officials for many years?
I think that is an established fact, but I also wanted to add that as General McInerney said on your program, the NSA has done tremendous work in defending this country. It's been very important, in past wars, in Vietnam, in the Cold War. So it is very important for us to be able to know what the bad guys out there are doing, whether they're terrorists or whether these are foreign governments planning to conduct military operations against us. The problem is when officials decide to cross the line and turn something that was designed to defend the United States against the American people, then we're in trouble.
Right. And so if we just focus on the NSA platform and the abuse of the NSA platform and abuse of the 702 forms and process, that's really, if we just focus on that, and tell me if I'm wrong on this assessment, that's the tip of the iceberg. If we ignore what's occurring on these parallel platforms, we by not acknowledging their existence, by not realizing that, wait a minute, there's something going on over here, we could well be giving a pass to people that have criminally abused the American population. Is that an overstatement? Is that a wrong statement?
It's far more.
No.
It's far more.
I want to just make the comparison, if it's okay.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so I think maybe you've heard of black programs, that these were programs that the CIA would run off the books, okay? Whether it was, trafficking in arms or narcotics, they would, if they didn't get something approved, say a program they wanted to do, if they couldn't get congressional approval,
yes,
they would just go off on their own and do their own rogue black operation to raise money to conduct other operations. So there's a history within CIA of doing this sort of thing, which is beyond anything the NSA does, as far as I know. So I think you could look almost at the hammer if the information that we're hearing, from Dennis Montgomery, is what we're looking at. Then that this would be almost like a black surveillance program where they go kind of off the grid, no congressional oversight, off on their own, and when you have something set up secretly like that nobody knows about, then the temptation to use it, or perhaps it was by design for people like John Brennan, who obviously, with his communist background, has a problem with the United States from day one, right?
Well, but there's more to that, and that is that the CIA does not have a charter to work in the United States against the American people.
That's right.
So when they are working in the United States against the American people, this really must be looked at as the CIA has declared war on the American people.
Because this parallel platform we're discussing and other parallel platforms, that's not an that wasn't under NSA direction. That was under actually the direction of the CIA, correct?
Correct. And that's key. That's key because what they're trying to do is change the narrative to distract the American people and say that this was a violation of protocol. The NSA 702s. This is not a violation of the NSA 702s. This is far worse, and they would like us to believe that it is 702 violations. This is a secret surveillance system put in place by the CIA against the American people.
We've done a series of interviews. I've had Paul Rosenberg on my show, General McInerney, as you mentioned, Alan. I've had Bill Binney and Kirk Wiebe several times on a number, I don't know, but a half dozen times on my platform. And what I did is I took your articles. You have like 7 or 8 articles on this illegal surveillance issue. Okay, I don't know of anyone who has a more comprehensive set of articles and research than the two of you on this issue, and I give you a lot of credit because I know you've taken you put your lives on the line. I mean, you truly have put your lives on the line, and that's not an overstatement. I provided them with your articles. I provided them with state secrets privilege document that John Negroponte signed in 2006 against Dennis, and along with Dennis Montgomery, along with a number of other documents. And I just want to, and I've read this before. I've talked to Kirk and Bill in the last 24 hours. They both stand behind their statements. I want to just, for our listeners that haven't followed this all the way through, Kirk Wiebe and Bill Binney, I believe, are the two biggest experts in the world in surveillance and surveillance platforms. There are no two more authoritative figures in the world. This was from Kirk Wiebe. Dave, all the documents you sent testify to the effect that Dennis Montgomery was involved in developing surveillance methods for the United States government that the latter entity, the United States government, believed would pose grave dangers to the national security if divulged. In reviewing them, I did not see anything questionable or that would indict what Dennis has said. Best, Kirk Wiebe. And Bill responded to that. Dave, I agree with Kirk on that statement. Bill. So the question is, Mary and Alan, where do we go from here? Because I can tell you I've been in touch with Bill and Kirk, and I know we've discussed this as well. And I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, the single greatest way to expose the criminals that have been illegally surveilling American citizens, whether it's the NSA platform or whether it's parallel platforms, is we need transparency and we need the light of truth on it. And I believe one of the best, most effective ways for that to happen is for individuals in our Justice Department to step forward and, if you will, allow the information to come forward. Is that reasonable?
That's necessary in order to save the republic. If we don't walk this back, there is no freedom in this country. Yeah. When President Trump came out and told that he was being wiretapped by Obama and Trump Tower just before his victory, he says nothing was found, McCarthyism. That was on March 4th, 2017. Within hours, we, the American Report, responded to President Trump and told him that Brennan and Clapper had tapped Trump a zillion times, says CIA contractor Dennis Montgomery. And, you know, we called President Trump's alert to that before we published our paper on March 17th and before General McInerney and Admiral Lyons brought this to Operation Freedom and Dr. Janda's WHAM 1600. At that point in time, the FBI knew that others knew what they were up to. And understand that they took those 47 hard drives and they buried them. Mm-hmm. They did not bring forward the information. They buried it. On top of that, Dennis Montgomery has said that Robert Mueller's FBI supplied him the computers to build the secret surveillance system for Brennan and Clapper. So beyond what we know about the system, we know about the Russia collusion investigation that ensued after the exposure of this. And what's important is Curtis, DOJ Curtis, mm-hmm. FBI Barnett, FBI Giardina, Strzok and Page, all that were talking and involved in Dennis Montgomery's investigation of the Hammer, every one of them then joined Robert Mueller's Russia collusion investigation. Every one of them.
So I have made the statement before that one of the reasons why this whole Russian collusion hoax narrative was fabricated and hoisted upon the American public was to cover up the illegal activity that was occurring not just on the NSA platform, but with the parallel platforms, and in particular the Hammer. Is that an erroneous statement, Alan?
No, and I think the best testimonial to that would be the statement that General McInerney made just after the July 4th weekend when he came on your program, and you asked him, do you still stand by everything you presented when you came on the show originally on March 19th, 2017? He said, absolutely, Dave, absolutely. That information was spot on. Furthermore, Admiral Ace Lyons, U.S. Navy Admiral, former commander of the Pacific Fleet, God rest his soul, who was, in touch with you as well as General McInerney, they were close friends, believed in his heart that this was a coup. He was most concerned with the coup. What about the coup, Dave? We've got to stop this. And both of them believe strongly that this Russia collusion hoax was a cover for the hammer, that's the real story that they're afraid of, because the treason is so over the top. This country's never seen anything like this before.
Well, and in fact, Mary, tell me if I'm wrong on this. Dates matter, words matter, dates matter. When General McInerney came on Operation Freedom, the radio show, March 19, 2017, and spoke about the hammer, and that was with the support of Admiral Ace Lyons, the next day, Comey went in front of Congress, and what did he do, Mary?
The following morning, Comey launched the Russia collusion investigation. He not only launched the Russia collusion investigation, he said there was no wiretapping of Trump. Mm-hmm. So he came out and lied, and then he launched the Russia collusion investigation, to be headed by the man who was tweeting with his lover the night before, Peter Strzok, about Klayman and Montgomery immediately after General McInerney came off air. And Comey was putting in charge the head of counterintelligence from the FBI, Deputy Director of Counterintelligence, Peter Strzok, the very man who was tweeting or texting to his lover about Montgomery and Klayman. So imagine that the same people that were involved in the cover-up were then being put in charge of the Russia collusion investigation.
There are individuals that have said this entire narrative of the hammer, parallel platforms, illegal surveillance on those platforms is really null and void, because Dennis Montgomery has a sordid past. Now, have you, Mary, or you, Alan, ever said that Dennis Montgomery was a saint? In fact, I've been hammered, pun intended, that I'm too easy on Dennis. I've also been hammered that I'm too hard on Dennis. Frankly, I'm conflicted on Dennis, right? Because Dennis sat at a table with Brennan and Clapper, and for a period of time, illegally surveilled people, millions of people. And but somewhere along the line, and maybe it was because he had a massive stroke followed by 3 smaller strokes in 2014. But somewhere along the line, Dennis decided to go meet Judge Lamberth in his chambers and seek protection. We always, as journalists, you always have to consider your source, but you also have to consider the facts and the data. I want Alan and Mary, both of you, because I believe it's important. I've said I'm conflicted on Montgomery, but I do believe the data. I do believe what happened that is documented with Lamberth, with the FBI, with the limited immunity, with the full immunity, with what Baker testified to. Alan, your take on Dennis Montgomery? Alan?
I apologize. I was having a technical issue.
Oh, no problem.
My take on Dennis Montgomery is that, well, look, the guy's a government contractor. He's a CIA contractor. He didn't work at Baskin Robbins. They're going to be asked to do things that are questionable. Yeah. I think that comes with the territory, especially when you're working in, special access programs, read into those sort of programs. I don't know what's in his mind. At some point, whether I'm not going to try to second guess what he was thinking, but at this point, he's decided to bring this information forward at tremendous risk to himself and his family.
Yeah.
So whatever he had to do for the government, I'm not defending it, but at this point, I think the most important information is that he has brought the information forward, and that we have to go forward with that.
Mary.
Yeah, remember, he was the one who put this in place, and according to our military sources, the hammer, a foreign surveillance tool, saved American lives and was very effective. So Dennis did that too, remember?
Right. And you also, did you not? I remember in one of your articles, or maybe two of your articles, you and Alan point out the fact that military intelligence sources have come to you and confirmed that. Is that wrong or correct?
That is correct.
So
But
that's
not
from a
only-
third-party source, high-level military intelligence sources that you trust.
Not only did military sources that we trust bring us that information, but remember, President Trump tweets, we tweet back, break this open about the hammer, and then on March 7th, WikiLeaks dumps Vault 7, where the existence of the hammer is confirmed. WikiLeaks drops documents where the existence of the hammer is confirmed on March 7th, 2017. So, Dennis Montgomery, while you remember he designed the original hammer. It's a computer system with exploits that throw from the platform. He also came and went and turned against Brennan and Clapper and said, this is my last stand for America. This is a man who'd had 4 strokes, came back from that, and said, I will not let this stand, what they are doing to the country, turning a foreign surveillance tool against the American people. So while he did work for the agencies, he came and made his final stand for this country and for the Constitution and for our freedom. And as Ronald Reagan says, the lights go out here, they will go out everywhere. And I think Dennis Montgomery understands that.
Well, and
and we've been told.
Go ahead, Alan.
Yes, these military sources have told us that the technology that Mr. Montgomery developed have saved American lives. And I think you can probably extrapolate that to mean that probably they've saved U.S. troops' lives.
Dates matter, words matter, dates matter. And here's the bottom line. Because Dennis Montgomery came forward and was the only person who came forward speaking about parallel platforms, until Bill Binney and Kirk Wiebe on June 6th of 2019, in an interview we did, they stepped up and said, you know what? Dennis Montgomery has been on point on this for a long time, and here's the bottom line. Parallel platforms exist. And the reason why we know they exist is because we have also participated on parallel platforms that were outside of the NSA's purview. And there are parallel platforms, as you've mentioned, that can be used for good, but in the wrong hands, with the wrong set of priorities, it can be used for terrible harm. And I truly believe that if it were not for Dennis Montgomery coming forward years ago, that this discussion of parallel platforms and illegal surveillance on anything other than the NSA platform never would have occurred. And for that point alone, I give Dennis Montgomery a tremendous amount of credit.